Welcome, guys, gals, non-binary pals, to this week's edition of Buffy Boys, your weekly review of Buffy the Vampire Slayer from a queer, literary and feminist perspective. And this week we are watching the first part of Buffy's Season 2 finale, Becoming, Part 1. My name is Joel, and with me as always is...
Brian, hi.
Hi.
Hello.
We're excited. This is a fun episode. For a number of reasons. The excitement permeates the air. The children outside are screaming death wails in the playground beneath our apartment, so it's all very thematic. So we are going to kick off and get straight into the good gooey guts of this episode. Brian, if you want to give us the Buffy and summary for Becoming Part 1.
Yeah, sure, of course. So this is Season 2, Episode 21 of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It was first released on May the 12th, 1998. And it was written and directed by Joss Whedon. Mm-hmm. So Joss Whedon, okay, well, Interestingly, the two-parter, like, it wasn't shown concurrently or one episode one night and then the next. It was 2 weeks and 2 weeks.
Oh, really? That's interesting. Yeah. It wasn't like a television event.
It wasn't like a television event, which actually I think a lot of places a lot of the places I've been reading about group this two-parter into one kind of movement, like the Wikipedia page for it. Like, I mean, Wikipedia has separate entries for every episode of Buffy, which I appreciate, but it specifically groups these two together, and I thought that was kind of a bit odd.
Sure.
Especially because I feel like, personally, specifically, that they have different feels to the two episodes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, so Becoming Part 1, this is our Buffy and summary. Archaeologists... there's lots of words here I can't say. Archaeologists uncover the entombed demon Akatla, which Angelus, who's turning by Darla... Angelus? Did I say it right?
No.
Angelus. Turning by Darla, cursed and falling for Buffy we see in flashbacks, steals in an attempt to wake Akatla and suck the world into hell. Willow finds Jenny's backup disc. Her recasting of the curse is interrupted by Drusilla, who kills Kendra and abducts Giles for his knowledge of the Akatla ritual. Like...
It's a very dense summary, and it also doesn't explain how any of these things got there.
So, like, one sentence there. Willow finds Jenny's backup disc. Her recasting of the curse is interrupted by Drusilla. Like, that doesn't make any sense, especially when in your summaries, I'm looking at the summary for Passion here, it doesn't mention the fucking backup disc, you know?
I also think it's a bit euphemistic to call her floppy disk, which had like a text file on her backup disk. Yeah.
Wasn't she literally using it to bring to Giles?
Yeah, I think so.
So it wasn't a backup disk, it was it was a transporting disk anyway.
One of a number of problems with
Jesus
it. Yeah.
Christ. Yeah, this episode was really good.
It's very, very good. It's
definitely a setup episode, though.
It's definitely a setup episode, and I think there's a conversation to be had about when you do have things that directly lead into and where the primary purpose is to set up a climax narratively, how well they can stand together, because they always end up being to some degree overshadowed by the actual collapse.
Yeah, but I think this one does a pretty good job of it, in the sense that, like, it takes a really smart approach to it. It has that bit more space in an episode because it doesn't have to have a denouement or a real conclusion to it, though it does have a pretty good conclusion.
Yeah,
but it's not like its crescendo is off put, you know, in this episode. So it means that, like, they do have the space to explore Angel's background, and really they do some, like, really nice cinematography in the episode. The stuff around Drusilla I found really affecting. I don't remember being quite so affected by her scene, her origin story, because in the episode they basically do a bunch of flashbacks to Angel's past. So the episode opens with Angel in Galway in the 17th century?
1753.
No, sorry, 1753, so the 18th century. Which is, a couple of people have mentioned, apparently he's like, at this point, he's 240 years old, or something like this. They've referred to him as being 240 years old a couple of times in the text, which would mean that he was born literally that day, essentially.
They're not incorporating his human years. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, someone definitely picked that date and didn't think that through at all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We see Angel in Galway, where he gets sorted by Drusilla. Then you see him in England about 60 years later.
London in 1860, so it's actually 90 years later.
90 years later,
yeah,
sorry. It's 1860.
1860, yeah.
110 years later, Joel.
110 years later, Brian.
Wow. So
I should work for the continuity department on Buffy.com.
You sure should. You absolutely should.
TV.
So then, and he's feeding on a priest, and Drusilla comes to confess her sins because she's been seeing visions, and her mother tells her that's like a sign that she's touched by the devil. And he kind of begins his torture of her in that moment, because he tells her that she needs to give in to her evil ways, and she is a child of the devil essentially,
yeah.
And it was really affecting. And then the other two flashback scenes are in New York in 1996 and Los Angeles in 1996, where Angel meets Whistler, and and he's been basically just like, there's a flashback as well to the late 19th century where Angel gets ensouled by the
Calderdash clan.
The Calderdash clan
in the Romanian woods location.
So and then yes, the final flashbacks are when he is in Los Angeles and New York in 1996, where he meets Whistler, who finds him as a bit of a down and out, and tries to rehabilitate him by showing him Buffy becoming a vampire slayer. For the first time, and Angel says, "Yes, I'll look over her," basically. That's really interesting in one way, because that whole theme of him trying to progressing to a point where he wants to help Buffy, it's a nice moment, because in this episode you don't see that of Angelus. He's absolutely just the ferocious monster that he has been for the latter half of this season. But that kind of moment of caring that he has towards Buffy as a 16-year-old is kind of creepy. That's real. But
15 then, I think
15
while she's in Henry.
So that's it's quite a nice touch and a nice setup to remind us of what's going to be the events of the next episode.
They do a remarkable amount with this episode, which for a less successful outing would actually be a mess. So they give Angel's entire exposition, essentially. Any additional exposition you get for Angel, for the most part, for the next 7 years of programming, draws on this episode, essentially. They do that. They introduce out of nowhere an apocalypse with a Catholic that's introduced in this episode. They have a lot of relationship stuff with Willow developing her powers and them finding Jenny's notes, Kendra returning. There's quite a lot happening in the one episode, and obviously giving all the stuff about Drusilla and about how Buffy actually became a vampire slayer, and yes, still actually having the plot of Angel kidnapping her friends and all that. So they managed to get all that done. But what I think is interesting is there's so many elements. So one of the things that there's another episode that Angel narrates for, and one of the things he narrates and which Whistler introduces as well is the concept of big moments coming, and that some things are predestined, but really it's about how you act when things just happen, essentially, that defines you. Quite a lot of the important things that happen in this story are completely coincidental. In the sense that Darla coming across Angel and siring him in Galway is not implied to be anything other than just a whim of hers.
Angel finding Drusilla,
absolutely. So I think it's important to know that we established before that Angel did torture Drusilla, but he literally just happened upon her and made a whim to pursue her, and also specifically a Catholic. Which is something which I hadn't thought about coming up to this episode, is the demon Catholic who is slain by virtuous night before he can end the world and can be resurrected, is just found in Sunnydale, and Angel says, this is something I can capitalize on. It's not something he has introduced, which is a little weird. But then the most significant thing that isn't a coincidence as such is, and what I think is quite a significant revelation, is that Angel's known Buffy her whole Slayer life. He's not just a do-gooder vampire who ran into her in Sunnydale. He's actually deliberately been doing this, which I think is actually, looking back now, is actually quite a turn.
Yeah. So you're totally right, and we should definitely look at those things in two different ways. One is that the concept of Whistler's whole voiceover is what he says is, bottom line is, even if you see him coming, you're not ready for the big moments, etc., etc., etc. So what are we? Helpless? Puppets? No, the big moments are going to come. You can't help that. It's what you do afterwards that counts. That's when you find out who you are. And this is obviously and Mark Fields highlights this, a really pivotal moment for Joss Whedon's whole existential tendencies in this text. So that would be a very existential suggestion, is that, what you are and who you are is not inherent in what you, in you. It's, your essence doesn't exist previous to your existence. Who you are is about what you've done, and self-determining, essentially, and your reactions. So that's obviously quite important for Buffy, in the sense that the existentialist themes have been really built up a lot in this season. So especially in Lie to Me, was a big one where what was his name? Billy felt like he didn't have any choice in the matter. He felt like he was like he life was unfair, and Buffy said, well, no, you have a choice and you made the wrong one. And she said, I'm going to try to make the right choice here and do the right thing. And yeah, they're very, very existential thing. The other thing, really interestingly, is Angel, yes, specifically chose to watch Buffy, and it wasn't a matter of coincidence. Mm-hmm. But what was it? It was the powers that be, right? That pointed them towards her.
Yeah, so this, so we should use
the powers that be being like a very important force in the Buffy universe in terms of setting things in motion.
Yeah, so this episode introduces something. I'll get into this when we talk about lore, because it introduces a rake of significant concepts for the Buffy universe. But one it does introduce is the concept that balanced against the forces of the Hellmouth and the demons, there are forces ostensibly of light, or at the very least oppositional forces, which are not actually named in this episode, but go on to be called the powers that be.
I think the powers that be are first referred to in season 3 at some point, because they are what brings Angel back from the dead.
Amends, potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, specifically. And Whistler, who is introduced in this episode as the person who found Angel and kind of rehabilitated him and put him on the path, is a self-identified demon who works for the powers of good. So we're introducing the concept of demons or anything other than just like mostly feral but exclusively evil creatures. And yeah, so like the powers that be do set a lot of things in motion, and they become a central point of the Angel series. But that also examines how, even though they set things in motion, they're ultimately just individuals to some degree setting things in motion.
But how does that sit in, like, with our existential approach to Buffy, whereby, you know, it's the decisions you make in a chaotic world that determine who you are? Because I mean, like, you know, having specific movers up there, that really suggests a much more traditional philosophy of, like, I mean, deities, you know, like traditional like deity kind of like morality, which like is
a pantheon and cosmology, kind of like a god driven. Yeah. I think they're there, and I think they're introduced as, I think they're static, neutral, meaning resistant entities in the Buffy universe. And I think people ascribe meaning to them and use them as relational things. Some people see this and move away from it. Some people see it and think it explains everything. I think what the text actually says is, look, they are there, but we're not saying canonically they are good, they are evil. It is destiny, it's not destiny. Because I think what Buffy does as a show and as a character is Buffy is born and built into this hero's journey. She is the chosen one, and there's been hundreds and of chosen ones before her.
Chosen's one,
yeah. She is working towards how to some degree, escape that structure and redefine it, but she is fundamentally, she's part of that machine. She's the Slayer, which I think leads up to right to season 7 with the potentials and breaking that down, and the fact that the Buffy series finale is called Chosen. That's a significant choice. Angel,
well, chosen being in that situation that Buffy has chosen to disperse the power, as in the point is not there that everyone is chosen now. But that is one of the points, but one of the other points is that Buffy has made a choice to disperse.
And the important thing being that she's made a choice, you know, more than necessarily what the choice is. Whereas Angel is also part of this cosmology by being a vampire, but his whole thing in terms of finding meaning is moving away from it, and wanting to say, well, vampires aren't just necessarily this one thing, which is why the Angel show is so much about kind of deriding and breaking down the concept of the powers that be and introducing complications to that. And the Angel series finale is called Not Fade Away. And one of the things that becomes one of his mantras in the show, which echoes what Whistler says here, is, if nothing we do matters, all that matters is what we do.
Sure, yeah, and that's a very existential theme. Funny enough, I actually do think that the powers that be stuff do kind of to some degree contradict the existential themes of the show, but thankfully the powers that be mainly trend towards the Angel TV show. As in, they're much more heavily involved in what goes on in Angel versus what happens in Buffy.
Yeah, and even in Angel, to be fair, they are more involved. They're actually not very present. They just talk about them a lot more.
Yeah. Well, but like, no, they're very present, Joel, in the sense that all the visions that but what's it called again? What's his name? Doyle gets, and then Cordelia gets. They're all from the powers that be.
No, they are definitely. But what I would say present would be an actual direct impact in terms of appearing in person or that kind of thing, you know, or causing direct conflict. They're a narrative, like the powers that be. both textually and like in universe and out of universe, are a narrative device.
Yeah.
And there's the concept that the events in the world are a narrative that can be influenced one way or the other and misinterpreted.
But as we were kind of like, we moved away from there, that scene with Drusilla really, I found it like really upsetting. Like she was such a desperate young woman in that scene. I thought it was a really good acting by Juliette Lando. She just brings a lot of you can see the non-twisted version of Drusilla in that performance. Just like a very vulnerable, very frail, well, not frail actually, I'm not going to say frail, very vulnerable, very confused,
sensitive, like specifically sensitive,
woman who's doesn't know what to do about this fact that she's like having these visions, and Angel taking advantage of that. It gives that really creepy, gross feeling, and it's really upsetting.
So I think specifically, like, you have Angel taking the place of a priest, which is like, this is so obvious we don't need to belabor it, but like a very patriarchal figure. Drusilla being ostensibly devout Catholic, and we see a lot of Catholic imagery here. And because she's already under this immense subjugation from kind of the patriarchal society that she's in, and being told that she's wrong, and like the height of this kind of England 1860 being told she's wrong, she's impure, she's singing, she's dirty, and begging the highest man that she can connect with, which is like a priest, please tell me I'm good. And that's the position that Angel moves from. I think the episode does two very smart things. You need to connect with Drusilla, as you need to understand that the only reason Drusilla now is tragic is you need to understand that she was a good person, as Angel was.
Well, Angel was he just was a person.
He was not yet, sure, absolutely. Angel was no saint when he was alive, but he wasn't a murderer. Do you know what I mean? And similarly, as you said, because Angelus is exclusively in this episode, we need to see the Angel we know and love to some degree for the conclusion of the season to have that emotional weight. And you could forget to do those two moments. And of course, with Drusilla being established as someone who you actually feel pity for, and then having that turn when she kills Kendra.
Exactly.
You could forget to do that, and then you'd be relying on people to emotionally remember that, but they make space in the episode 4, which I think is really strong writing.
Yeah, one of the things that Drusilla says is, I don't want to be an evil thing, which is just like, I don't know, there's something about that was real like odd simplicity and so childish in its phrasing, to like it really like indicated to me that like there was like a real tragedy in her story. So you have a bunch of lore stuff you want to go through. So you reckon that this episode has, even before the episode, what you said to me was that there's a bunch of lore implications here that I might not even have been aware of. So I'd love to hear it.
There's obvious lore.
Please tell me, Joel.
With the one and only time you asked me to tell you about lore.
No, Joel, I want to hear more about the lore of your D&D setting. Please tell me more.
It's quite intricate, actually. But anyway, we'll talk about Buffy, I guess. So there's some obvious lore stuff here. So they've introduced Whistler. They've introduced a concept, as I said, of demons who are not necessarily evil. The concept of the powers that be. I think when you have a supernatural show and you introduce an opposing force, that's a huge state change. Introduce the concept that these powers that be have some vested interest in the Slayer, so that the Slayer isn't just the show has never examined where the Slayer has come from. It's almost treated a bit like, as long as there have been vampires, there have been Slayers. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's introducing that there's specific motivation, and what that does is takes it away from a law of nature, a concept that there's just that magic is a force in the universe, that demons are, and that Slayers are just something that happens without human agency or without conscious agency. When you introduce powers that be, you introduce organizations and politics and motivations and ideologies in a way that hasn't been part of how we think of the Slayer up until this point in what's been televised.
Sure.
You introduce the idea in this episode of Willow's magic really coming to the fore, really her saying, I can do this. I've been reading about dark magics in my spare time for fun, educational fun. And specifically, Giles has a line where he says that this might open a doorway that is not easily closed, which is obviously a reference to her lesbianism. No, a reference to her foreshadowing, absolutely. But it's 100% true. She doesn't come back from this. This is the point. This is the significant point at which she commits herself to magic.
Interestingly, one of the things that he says is that that she would be channeling the magic through her as opposed to doing magic, essentially, which is interesting. And that does continue to be the case through Buffy, is that when magic is cast, it's not from within, it's channeling a power,
Yeah.
external power, which is just an interesting note in terms of the technicalities of Buffy's magical lore.
So she's channeling this magic which escalates, and they often do have that, like Amy channels Hecate, and there's all that joke about Hecate turning this person into a rat, etc. Yeah? But this escalates to the point in season 6 when Dara dies of her trying to channel Osiris, who's the god of death, to bring her back, and actually repudiating him and like driving him away because she's so angry.
Yeah.
And then she becomes the source of the power. So there's an interesting arc there. Something it does, which is introduced in these flashbacks. It's the first time we see someone getting sired as a vampire, specifically. When Darla sires Angel and establishes this mechanism of it's not enough to drain a person, you have to drain them a bit, and they have to drink from you, and introduces this tradition of a very sexual depiction of that, where she like cooks across her breasts and makes him moger boger, essentially.
Yeah, and actually, on that point, because I was reading about that whole scene. Christina Busse, I want to say, or Busse, so I'm not sure but I'm not sure how you pronounce that. Busse, anyway. Right in Crossing the Final Taboo, which is an essay about Buffy and incest, essentially, highlights the scene specifically because very much takes on the maternal role here, because she's breastfeeding Angel in some ways.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely.
And she's creating her own child, and they go on to have a very, but it's also a very sexual act, and they go on to have a sexual relationship. So they're like, she just highlights this as one of the, like, a very striking example of the incest imagery through the show, specifically shown through the incestuous, like, vampire bacchanalian kind of thing.
Yeah, Andrew Sale being portrayed as so not compos mentis and so much of a child, but there being obvious sexual, like overt sexualization of her and all this kind of stuff. It's also interesting with Darla, because up until now, this is obviously a surprise return for Darla in this flashback.
Yeah, I'd say if you're watching this in 1998 and you see Darla there, you're like, oh yeah,
remember
nice.
her? Yeah. She's portrayed as quite young and teenagey in her earlier episodes, obviously dressing like a schoolgirl, whatever. She's clearly a vampire, but her characterization is quite young, where she takes on a maternal role here, which kind of continues through her portrayal when she comes up.
I'd agree. I think it's probably just that basically it's been 2 years and she's probably just aged a little bit, so she can't really play because she does play like a 16-year-old in the first scene. Yeah. So she can't. I think she just doesn't play that age group.
She acts kind of like a recently sired vampire when she's with the Master in season 1. But the concept of establishing that she is quite as old and experienced as she is, you wouldn't expect that from her interactions with Angel in season 1, essentially.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a rewriting of her character.
Oh, I'm perfectly happy with that. I think it's a good move to do. And for me, one of the more significant things from a lore point of view for this episode is they've established how Buffy became a Slayer. Yep. Which is really key. And very much what Joss Whedon has done is he's taking his original script for the Buffy movie, which we will discuss when we watch the Buffy movie, which will happen.
What did we say? We'd do that at Christmas? Is that what we said?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
But obviously his intentions for it were a little straighter and a little less slapstick as the film was. And so he's basically used this episode to retcon in what elements of that actually did happen, essentially. And there's a comic series which I do intend to read because it's meant to be reasonably canonical and useful, called Origins, which shows the scenes you don't see from this flashback, essentially, and establishes which pieces are kept and which aren't. But you see Buffy at 15, Henry High School in Los Angeles, and it portrays her very much as like Cordelia. Yep. She's it's very Cordelia and the Cordex, but Buffy and the Buffy X, sucking on a lollipop in a kind of clearly like early teen kind of childishness to her. She's very inconsiderate of other people. She's very oblivious. She talks about how she doesn't have a destiny. She's destined to this, and she's approached by her first watcher, which isn't something that has been established in the show before. That she had another watcher, Merrick. Yeah, and what the film shows, but what the kind of the actual backstory, in my opinion, Buffy retains because it's expanded on in this canonical comic, is that Merrick, trains her. She tries to slay her first vampire. We see her in this episode missing the heart, which is something she tells Dawn later on that she did the first time she tried to stake a vampire. But Merrick's backstory is that he's trained and seen 5 Slayers killed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in a fairly short period of time. So I think that translates into, in this episode, he's quite zealous. He's like he's weirdly like
quite intense
about it. And eventually, she tries to kill a master vampire called Lothos, and he nearly sires Merrick. So Merrick kills himself, shoots himself in the head to stop himself from being used against Buffy.
It's fucking intense.
And she sees this, and so like when Buffy comes into the show, I think the text carries that she's traumatized by this to a certain degree. And eventually, as she said, burns down the gym to kill the vampires and has to move. And we see in this flashback, which we'll talk about a little bit separately, I think, the start of a breakdown of her life and her relationship and her truancy and her delinquency and her issues with her parents and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But like establishing that, just this society of watchers from a different angle, Buffy turning from a potential into the actual Slayer when the previous Slayer presumably was killed, being trained by a watcher she had before Giles, like that adds, I think, a significant amount of texturization to all the other interactions she has.
Agreed.
So I'll leave it there for the moment in terms of lore, but like this changes the shape of the Buffy universe. And if they had made different choices, if they never said there was a powers that be, if they never said that demons could be anything other than monsters, it like that ripples forward in the show. Yeah, no doubt.
Speaking of Angel, one of the interesting scenes in this episode is that Buffy is sent what's it called again? It's an
immolationogram
by Angel. Basically, a female vampire comes into her class and
covered in a shroud,
and then takes it off and starts to basically self-immolate, and delivers a message to Buffy saying more will die unless you come to Angel, basically.
Yeah, it's another example of vampires who, the ones who kind of buy into the whole, Baroque Dracula-esque conversation, like they just die, they just fodder for the more engaged vampires.
Pretty good visual effects though for all.
Someone who went into this.
Yeah, definitely. But so Buffy is basically has to split from the group. She goes to fight Angel while the others are casting the curse to try to re-ensoul Angel.
Did we establish that basically that they find the curse?
So yeah, in a really, really it was really well shot and quite like poignant scene. Buffy and Willow Buffy drops a pencil. She finds the backup floppy disk from Miss Calendar, and they find out that they can do the curse again for Angel's soul. So Buffy gets taken away from her friends and finds Angel, and Angel reveals that it's actually been a hoax, that she's been set up, that they basically wanted Giles, that she was just just taken away from them. And yeah, apparently this has been like a subject of debate in the fandom.
Okay.
Because what Angel says there is she falls for every time. Mm-hmm. And do you know what that's a reference to?
It's with the Master, she was led away as well, and the library was attacked, I think.
So it was when she was bad. So that was the episode where they're trying to bring the Master back.
Yes, yeah.
And the library is attacked, and Xander is kind of horrible to Buffy. Remember?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we really didn't like it. We didn't actually think it was her fault, I think, at the time. But people have basically suggested that this is another situation that Buffy has acted incorrectly. Mm-hmm. I don't think so. Because A, she leaves Kendra with them, who is a fucking
fully blooded Slayer.
Yeah. Absolutely. And B, she has to try to make sure that Angel's not killing more people. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was an odd one, and I do think that Xander gets really zealot. He gets really rude with her in the next episode about this potentially. Mm-hmm. But yeah, anyway, it was a nice callback to when she was bad, which is the first episode of the season. So that obviously, the ripple effect and that really nice interaction that Buffy just tends to do between episodes is there, in this callback.
Well, I don't think I would agree that I don't feel like it's necessarily her fault. But again, it repeats this pattern that when Buffy tries to go out alone with things and tries to say, look, I'm just going to block everything off and deal with it myself, that can often be when she inadvertently causes herself trouble and her self-harm. But
that's an interesting thing to say, because we will be discussing that loads in the next episode, which is all about Buffy being deeply isolated.
Yeah.
Because she, like in the next episode, she loses her family, her friends, and everything, and all that's left is
Mr. Pointy.
What?
Mr. Pointy.
No, it was me.
I know.
I was saying, thanks for trampling all over my joke, or my poignant line even.
You're quoting. You hate how people quote things. Do you want to be a quoter?
No, I don't. You're right. So yeah, we'll definitely talk about that next episode. That also brings up Xander. What a shithead.
Again, we're not trying to be obviously doing this, but
Xander Harris hate cast, is that what we call it?
Yeah, Xander Harris hate cast, but he just really walks into it. He really presents himself. So he has a situation here where, again, I think Buffy is that demonstrates strong strategy very often. She's good at her job, and this is her job. And she says, look, if we can re-install Angel, I want to try that.
Because it's a good move, just because if he's ensouled, then he's potentially not killing people.
Yeah, and that's literally her motivation. She's like, of course I would like if he was back. If he's not back, I will kill him, and I have no hesitation in doing that. But tactically, it's the best move to ensoul him as soon as possible. All totally sound. And Xander starts going on about how, I feel like everyone's forgetting the fact that he killed Miss Calendar. Very arguable that, if Angel could be ensouled, that it's his responsibility for that. But also, Xander didn't care that much. Xander cares about Jenny's death as a way to hate Angel more, but he didn't have a big relationship with Jenny, and to the point where even Giles is saying it seems that it was her last wish to right this wrong. Angel, yeah. And Xander says, yeah, well, Jenny's dead.
Yeah.
And Giles nearly decks him. Do you know what I mean?
Appropriately.
So unnecessarily
and
hostile.
It does set up for his decision in the next episode to not tell Buffy about Willow still trying to do the spell again. Because it's him taking his own taking responsibility onto himself, thinking that he knows best in the situation, and it's just a shitty guy thing to do, to be honest.
I just remember the thing about
Willow said kick his ass.
No, about Angel being re-ensouled and her not finding out about it. Or is it not that she doesn't find out about it, but what is it? It's something that she doesn't...
Okay, so basically, Xander said... Willow's going to re-ensoul him. Willow says to Xander to tell Buffy that she's going to try, basically. Buffy sees Xander, and Xander says... Yeah. Willow says, kick his ass. Buffy goes and does a big sword fight with Angel, and basically, as the Cathla is opening... Angel gets his soul back, and that's the moment that Buffy realizes the only way to close a Cathla is to kill Angel.
Yeah.
Which part were you missing there?
So it's in season 5 or something
that they find out that Xander has done this.
Yeah, I think so. I remember that correctly.
It's maybe season 6, I think.
But what they find out is that he knew.
Oh yeah. That
was the bit that he didn't say. Yeah. Not that she obviously does realize in the next episode that he is ensouled.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So he let slip in season 6 or something. That that thing where I knew basically that Angel that Willow was trying to save him, and Buffy's like, what? Which I enjoy. I enjoy that kind of callback. So that library scene is good for something else. Is that it does something Buffy does need to do occasionally, and it requires a deft hand. It needs to re-up the stakes in a meaningful way, because you see that the vampires attack, and you have to remember because the show is about killing vampires every week, pretty much, even though a lot of the episodes aren't actually about vampires. But you need to see vampires actually being dangerous occasionally. Yeah. They drop a bookshelf on Willow.
Really violently.
She ends up in the hospital. And in a scene I do not remember, they snap Xander's wrist, which is quite violent and quite gross. But you do need to remember that people like Xander can't just necessarily go out and just be staking vampires as well. They are vicious creatures who can kill people. And obviously the obvious escalation there being that when we see Drusilla properly in the field, she mesmerizes Kendra and slits her throat, which is deeply, deeply upsetting.
Yeah, a couple of things are deeply upsetting about that. Firstly, did you identify that as a callback to Prophecy Girl?
Yes, because this is obviously how the Master gets the best.
That's how the Master kills Buffy, is that he mesmerizes her and then leaves her for dead. So Kendra has died in the same way that Buffy has, basically. which is kind of sad. But no, it was a very upsetting scene. And Drusilla does, like, she's such a menace, and like she's portrayed so menacingly. And they introduce her, the shot that introduces her into the scene because the tide has already turned in the battle. Like in the library, they've already, like, it already seems like they're going to lose. Like Kendra's becoming outnumbered and stuff. So when Drusilla comes in, it's just like it's game over, which is really threatening and menacing.
The only weak part of that scene for that is the couple of shots of her actually fist fighting Kendra, because Drusilla doesn't work as a physical combatant.
No, absolutely. But it does bring into the whole, like, we have to reinspect the whole Kendra thing. I know we did talk a lot about Kendra in What's My Line Part 1, I think. So do go back and listen to the episode if you want to talk about, or if you want to hear all about the racial issues around the Kendra's character. One of the things that the essays around that suggested was that Kendra has assimilated essentially quite a lot in this episode. That she's like lost a lot of her
distinctiveness,
distinctiveness. And what I'd say is actually in this episode she's probably just underwritten rather than flattened out, in the sense that she just doesn't get a lot of script time in this episode, just because of how much is going on, which is shitty. And there's absolutely no doubt about it that her like, she is a black woman who is sacrificed for the script, and that is bad writing in some way, in a lot of ways.
Do you feel there's a potential that she's sacrificed because Joss Whedon has decided that in the next season it would be interesting to introduce a combative Slayer, and that Kendra couldn't be that Slayer?
Potentially. What I'm going to say, that's a very strong possibility. I would actually probably say, if I'm being really generous, that what's happening here is that they want to show that, like, Slayers die. And Slayers are young and vulnerable and etc. But, like, I mean, realistically, Kendra's death is purely there to give Buffy motivation and to give Buffy a sense of guilt.
Yeah. Drusilla obviously now joining Spike in the ranks of people who have killed Slayers.
Absolutely. Yeah. And she didn't feed on her, which I always think is a real, like, as we talked about with the Master, it's a real disrespectful kind of idea. But like, I mean, there's no defending the fact that, like, Kendra's, you know, the only black character in the show so far, and they sacrifice her to give Buffy motivation. Yeah. And it's like ultimately bad writing.
Buffy also did the accent again. I was really hoping she wouldn't.
She only did it for like 2 words, though, thankfully.
Still. Yeah. And they have Kendra laughing along. Ha ha ha. I really enjoy your impersonation of me. Yeah.
So, unlike Buffy, however, Kendra, as a tragic mulatto figure, fulfills her destiny in death. She leaves her home on a quest to fulfill what she believes to be ultimately accepted, to fulfill her destiny, only to be rejected as an unwelcome other. Although she is ultimately accepted by Buffy, the acceptance is on Buffy's terms. Kendra is assimilated when she returns to Buffy to Sunnydale to help Buffy again. Kendra pays for her assimilation with her life. And, like, you know, yeah, it's very important to bear in mind. Ultimately, Kendra she's done dirty by this TV show.
Like, the bottom line is that Kendra, like, for Kendra, we only have positives for what she brings to the show, in the sense that she introduces a kind of an interesting, obviously, lore, a different take on the Slayer stuff, not just as the flat hero's journey, but also the feminine issues she brings, feminism issues is what I meant to say.
She's also she's also very studious Vampire Slayer, which is just interesting.
She had a lot of potential beyond this, and while I think it escalates the stakes, pardon the pun, which for once was actually unintentional. People always say it's unintentional when they mean it. I actually didn't mean to make that point. I think, she didn't deserve to die. Yeah, in this episode.
Yeah, Mark Fields identify. So I think when we had What's My Line Part 1, I said that he does identify her as a virginal character who is essentially, or not a virginal character. Sorry, like she represents the kind of virginal, innocent perspective or aspect of Buffy's personality. So what he says here is, Drew killed Kendra, the id, destroying the last vestiges of Buffy's virginal innocence. So Drusilla is very much the id of the TV show. Like, she is the rampaging,
emotional maelstrom.
Exactly, thank you. Emotional maelstrom, wreaking havoc. And in this instance, she has basically removed the last vestiges of Buffy's, childhood in some ways, because Kendra is such an innocent character.
Absolutely, and I think it resonates with seeing Buffy the last time Buffy ever was carefree, which was in Hemery when she was 15. Yeah. And also the fact that it complicates the tragedy that Drusilla is the one to do this when she's also someone who had her innocence taken from her.
It is what we've been given. Bad writing aside, what we've been giving in this episode is 3 very tragic female characters who have been put upon and are trying to do their best. From that, Drusilla was tortured and driven mad. Buffy has been traumatized by her destiny, and Kendra has been sacrificed for her destiny. So,
and I think while the vampirism introduces as we said, a complex psychological and sexual and identity force into a queering force in many ways, ultimately the men in this show suffer because of what they have done to other people and the guilt of that, while the women of the show suffer because of what people have done to them. Like Drusilla's trauma is about what Angel does to her. Angel's trauma is about what he did to Drusilla. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's not really nothing ever happened to Angel other than he had to deal with the shit he did.
Yeah, no, you're right. So you said earlier that you think that this episode is notable because it doesn't subvert things. So what Joss Whedon often does in an episode or in a script is he will take a standard trope and play it different. But this is actually quite played straight.
Yeah.
And especially as a love story, you were saying.
And absolutely in Buffy as well. Like, if you can think of any later episode of Buffy, if they did what Angel does here, Angelus, where Buffy doesn't see him off screen, and she says to a vampire, tell Angel this is going to end soon, and Angel actually steps out from behind a crypt and says to himself, don't worry my love, it will end soon, or something to that effect. If this was any later Buffy episode, someone would cut him off, either asking him for a tourist asking him for directions, or someone would have staked him from behind, or there being some satirical subversion. And that's very standard Joss Whedon fare. But the fact that he kind of really doubles down on this love story and says, no, I'm doing something, and sometimes you have to play it through. It is a love story. It is a tragic love story. It's a complex story about trauma. And to do that, they say, you know what? We're actually going to say, no, Angel gets to narrate. He gets his monologues. Those moments have to happen because they have to land. So I thought that was an interesting approach to it.
Realistically, the moment of Angel and Buffy at the end of season 2, her sacrificing the man who she loves to save the world is it's the height of the soap opera movements of this TV show. It never reaches that height of melodrama again, and it was really effective. It's a really good point, and I think playing it reasonably straight in these 2 episodes is necessary, because in the further in seasons you move past the teenage youthful love story, you move into more complex adult issues, like the body is becoming part 2 and the body are probably the 2 most tragic episodes of the show. But you have to move past this teenage love, and you have to discard that. Buffy has to sacrifice that to become who she wants to become. And that's, you have to pass through this reasonably straightforward point to get to those more complex issues. And I think it's well done, because it'd be really easy to pull out your smarts in these episodes and be like, oh, here's the really smart way we're going to do it, in the really subversive way. But just playing it straight and playing it as a love story is actually so effective. You
need to earn those smart movements by being able to do the basic thing really well, I think. And I think that's what elevates Buffy over many other shows which have also tried, a fairy falls in love with a werewolf, or there's so many variations on it.
This is the meal ticket on which this show dines out on for the next 5 seasons, is Absolutely. The end of season 2. This is the bedrock of this TV show, is the Buffy Angel moment.
And given how much it earns it, while I was waiting to start recording this episode, I watched the TV promos that they aired at the time for it. Sells them short. I will be tweeting them out because they are available online.
Good.
But it's this week on the first half of season 2, Buffy the Vampire Slayer finale, Angel has to destroy the world and Buffy stops him in a way you will find so surprising. Tune in next week.
In a world where...
And then it's thunderclap, and then they edit in not only bits in this episode, but it's like they're constructing a ransom note because they've taken scenes of characters from other episodes who aren't in this, and like tried to escalate the stakes.
Yeah, wow.
I also watched the promo for the VHS copy of season 1 of Angel.
Oh, cool.
And in that they had like scenes of Spike being funny, but Spike's not on the show. Just like weird things like that. So I will tweet them, and then we'll talk about them.
Please. Okay, I have one last question for you before we move into our dusting. Who is becoming?
Buffy.
Yeah.
Buffy. She's becoming the person she is, you know? It's about her... Self-determining, about all the elements of her already being there, but them having to be catalysed. I think the season 1 finale was in some way about her becoming the Slayer that she is, and this is more about her becoming the woman that she is.
I think season 1 was about letting go of her fear of death. And
so she can do her
letting
job,
go and letting go of her sense of selfhood in some ways, of moving past a kind of a childish notion of feeling like you have to protect yourself before other people.
Yeah.
Which actually sounds really not good in terms of our current politics around self-care and stuff in the current culture, but you know what I mean. I think season 2 is about her letting go of her of a personal life, of her love of these things to become...
It's a rare example of a voiceover and a narration actually really adding something to contextualizing.
I totally agree. They do narrations well in this show.
They're very selective with them. But the point that...
the last one was passion, and that was like... that was deeply upsetting.
The point that Whistler makes about how, you know, you can't plan for the big moments necessarily, just it's about how you react, etc. Like the season 1 finale is her very much having to deal with how she deals with a fate that she feels she can't avoid and how she kind of engages with that. And I really do feel in the escalation here that things that are happening to her, things are happening in the world that she can't really control. People keep blaming her and trying to ascribe responsibility and agency. And she portrays, I think, a genuinely inspirational and focused maturity. The way she talks about, look, of course I want Angel back, but I will kill him if I need to, because it's what needs to be done. She doesn't say this in a boisterous machismo kind of way. It's not a threat. It's not boasting. It's just really mature. It's the word for it. Yeah.
There's definitely an aspect of you're totally right. There's definitely an aspect of Angel becoming too, given that this episode is about Angel bringing Angel to the point of the season 1 beginning, and bring him to that point and becoming the person he is currently.
Well, all episode titles are a purview that I think science fiction and fantasy have a specific ownership over. Like obviously they're done well in other shows sometimes.
6 Feet Under is what I'm thinking.
6 Feet Under is definitely always a good exception, but a really good episode title for a show like this means a number of things, you know.
Yeah, no, but I definitely agree that like this show is about Buffy growing and becoming an adult, and this episode definitely it's about her becoming. Okay, can I rattle off some Buffy bits?
Work away. Okay.
Whistler makes the joke in this episode that Buffy is prettier than the last one, which is obviously what the Master said as well in season 1. Oh yeah, in season 7 or season 6, in season 7, when Anya has turned demonic again, Buffy and Xander have a reversed interaction of this in this episode, where Buffy is saying that they need to try to turn Angel back, and Xander is saying no, he needs to be killed. Buffy will be the person saying Anya needs to be killed, and Xander will be going to be the one saying no, we need to save her in season 7.
It's almost like Xander's a hypocrite.
Yeah, almost like, oh, the person who is set on fire in the schoolroom.
Do you ever say things and you think, what are we doing with our life?
Yeah, I know. So she is the person, the woman who has been most set on fire in Hollywood.
Please tell me more.
Yeah, so she's just like a famously set on fire woman. Basically, she's just the stunt person who you get in to do that scene.
I suppose, like, if you turn over someone's headshot and it doesn't say horseback riding, it says "set me on fire," you would probably take notice of that.
Yep. So this episode won one of the two Emmys that Buffy ever wins. So this episode won it for dramatic underscore, and actually I was thinking during the episode the music was really, really good, so I'm totally unsurprised there. And the other Emmy that they win is the Emmy for best makeup for Surprise Innocence, but they never win an Emmy again. They get nominated for a bunch, but these are the only two Emmys that they actually win.
What's the great makeup in Surprise Innocence? Is it the judge?
Oh, yeah, the judge and Angelus.
Angelus facilitates between wearing eyeliner in this episode back and forth a bit.
He does, yeah. No, he does. This inconsistent. Yeah, those are my big. Oh, yeah. I was going to make a point about Mr. Pointy and being a symbol of Kendra's attachment to the patriarchy, but I think I already did that in the last episode that we talked about Kendra. So never mind.
It's a good bit. Can I give some Buffy Bits?
Please.
So, I'll just rattle through these, but I think Darla's return is really, really strong. I think it's interesting that Liam assumes that she's a sex worker. That's implied.
Oh, does he?
Because he talked about like, why would a noble lady like you being down at Ali that has such a bad reputation? And it's implying that maybe he doesn't actually think that she's noble, etc. Yeah. Do
you reckon that's kind of implying that there's some connection to that and the scene where he becomes Angelus again in Surprise Innocence?
That's a very good connection, definitely. I was actually just thinking about the fact that in later scenes with Darla, it's implied that she actually was a sex worker when she was human. So like, I think there's a thematic thing running through there that you could definitely unravel in an essay. So obviously very sexual. We have to say Dave Boreanaz's portrayal of Angel, love him, put so much effort into it. His Irish accent is fucking terrible.
Oh, it's awful.
And specifically,
it's the absolute worst.
It's an interesting choice that they decide to place him in Galway, which for our non-Irish listeners is not obviously the capital, but it's a county on the other side of the country, or city on the other side of the country. But it's not a Galway accent or anything even resembling.
No, it's not.
It's an authentic Irish accent.
It's a Tom Cruise. What was it called again?
Wind That Shakes the Barley. Was he in that one?
Joel.
I don't know.
No, it was Tom Cruise.
My Left Foot.
No. 1 second.
War of the Buttons.
Stop that. It's a Tom Cruise. It's a Tom Cruise far and away accent, which is one of the worst Irish accents ever committed to film. But it's an awful accent.
And his hair is just terrible for hundreds of years, apparently.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that Xander and Buffy talk about there being 5 vampires and 3 Nikes, which in some way, when they're patrolling, which in some ways is a lot, but it does home back that the stakes are often quite low in Sunnydale. It's like
they can be.
Yeah, they can be, yeah. The way that Giles finds out about Acathla is that this is just dug up somewhere in Sunnydale, and the curator says the Washington Institute said we happen to have a world expert on weird shit right here in Sunnydale. It's just like, I think it's weird that like Washington knows about Giles, but he's also just like a librarian in Sunnydale High School.
Yeah.
That's like Giles saying in the last episode that the toxicology lab in the hospital will solve this.
Yeah.
We see a scene with Oz and just all the Scoobies having lunch when Snyder comes in and just rude and basically sets up him kicking Buffy out of school in the next episode. But Oz has black nail polish, which I just thought was cute, and he's back and he hasn't been in.
Did he say anything that scene even?
Yeah, he did. He talked about. He said something about that he thinks that Willow would sweat cute blood, which I wrote down.
Disgusting. Wow.
What kind of name was Drusilla?
True.
For a Cockney girl in London in 1860. What the hell is that about? I often wonder if when Buffy talks about having deja vu and finding Jenny's backup disc. She drops her pen, doesn't find it the first time, then deliberately drops it again. She's like, I just had deja vu. I always wonder, is that complete coincidence or is that like some kind of Slayer?
Well, that was definitely a Slayer thing.
Intuition kind of thing, yeah. There was the phone call where Willow was giving out about Xander, and by context clues, you and I have established that there's nothing else she could have called him that would have made Buffy react like that other than calling him a cunt.
Yeah, we're pretty sure that Willow calls
because
Xander a cunt.
Buffy is shocked and says, do you kiss your mother with that mouth? I can't be asshole, I can't be bastard. All these things are not that bad by American standards. So yeah, like I didn't think I was going to find another reason to love Willow watching this show, but she's apparently just like swears like a sailor. Yeah. Buffy did that accent again. I find that Angel in his Angelus scenes, maybe it's just I'm aware of it, but I feel like I'm hearing the Irish accent a little bit, or he's inflecting it a little bit.
Oh, you reckon?
In the modern day, there was a certain, I think the certain touch of that was there as well. When they talk about what Acathla will do in terms of pulling them into hell, Giles says, the demon universe exists in a dimension separate to our own. Which is interesting because that's not fully correct. They do establish like that basically there's multiple dimensions and all this kind of stuff. But I think it does reflect the fact that Giles doesn't actually necessarily know a lot. He knows as much as the Watchers know, but there's areas of his knowledge that are definitely very, very patchy. But we do tend to treat that Angel was in hell for a while until we establish that it's just a singular hell dimension. it's quite funny that one of the aspects of the ritual is that Giles just has an orb of Thesla, which is such a crucial item. And there's a nice callback there where he says he's just been using it as a paperweight. And when Jenny buys one, the guy says, I just sell these as like trinkets
New
for
Age paperweights.
Yeah, New Age paperweights. But it's also something that could have taken a lot of story time to find. And Joss Whedon appropriate is like, this is not interesting. Giles just happens to have one. And yet the only thing I want to mention is that Angel, when he's trying to perform the ritual to draw the Sorg out of the Cathla, one is that the idea of blessing Sorgs and all this kind of stuff is kind of weird, and the sword that Kendra brings as a Chekhov Sorg essentially, it looks quite flimsy as a prop for one thing.
It does,
but he references his ascension, which is, I don't think is an actual foreshadowing, but like thematically ties things to the mayor, obviously. Dense episode
for sure. Here are a couple of fashion notes I noted. Willow is wearing dungarees in this episode, and they're not too bad, but they're not too great. Darla is wearing pearls in her hair in Galway in the 1750s. As you do, yeah. And most importantly, Whistler wears a green silk shirt with gold and black striped collar. It's the worst thing I've ever seen anyone wear, and a bowler hat.
It's a rare example of an outfit that is so horrendous that someone in the universe actually comments on it, because Angel says, I'll fight for the powers that be, but I won't dress like you.
Yeah. Actually, very quickly, we should note that Whistler was supposed to return in Angel in Doyle's role, but they couldn't get the actor back, which is funny because I've looked at about the actor. The actor did not end up doing a lot. So.
I was actually about to mention that because Doyle's sense of style is very similar to Whistler, and he's just clearly a recast substitute for the Whistler. Like, Doyle is a demon, half demon with the powers, the vision powers of being, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
You ready for death count? Do you mind if I do it?
Work away.
Okay. So Buffy mentions 3 vampires being dusted, as you just mentioned recently. So that's cool. 2 vampires dusted in the opening by Buffy. Angel gets sired by Drusilla. And Angel feeds an unidentified priest. There is the Calderdash girl.
In flashback,
Calderdash is another thing altogether. I've listed here an old man drained by Drusilla. Mentioned.
Yeah, Drusilla talks about that she met an old man and he got stuck in her teeth.
Good point, yep. Doug Perrin drained by Drusilla.
The curator of the Sunnydale Wacky Things Museum.
Exactly. The unidentified man sacrificed by Angel to a Cathla. The unidentified vampire who killed herself in sunlight. There is the vampire dusted by Kendra. And then there's Kendra, throat slit by Drusilla. So
bloody episode.
Yeah, really. There was lots of deaths there.
Yeah.
Okay, do you have your rating ready, Joe?
I do, yeah. I will give this episode, I think, a 9.7 thirsty Galwegian wigs.
Oh, wow, okay.
Because I think I have so little to fault about this. I think Kendra's characterization is an issue with her character, and because she's only in a very small number of episodes, this episode is weakened by how she is, as you said, underwritten. That's kind of my major issue with it. Otherwise, I think it's a masterclass of storytelling, particularly in this genre. I think it imparts a tremendous amount of information in a variety of directions without feeling like an exposition dump, while still having emotional weight and being a perfect setup for the finale. It's how part 1 of something should be done. Yeah,
you're not wrong. So I'm going to give it 9.1 orbs of Thesila out of 10. I think it is. I take real issue with the Kendra stuff, like genuine real issue.
This makes me seem more racist because I didn't take as much issue as you're taking.
Exactly. I actually do think it suffers because of it being a part 1, though I think it does it very, very well in another way. But it does feel like a build up, and having your build up be like having the crescendo not be the killing of Kendra. Actually, I think is an additional disservice to our character. But it's very well written, really well acted, really well shot at parts, and you can always tell a good episode of Buffy because they tend to do a good amount of close-ups, and this episode has quite a lot of close-ups, which I always quite like. And so 9.1 orbs of Thessia out of 10.
Great. I'm excited for next week.
I'm so excited. Becoming part 2 is such a important.
Are there any essays about it?
No essays. No one's ever written about it.
Okay.
What we'll do next week is it'll be a long episode because we'll be doing the we'll be doing our episode for coming part
of the show,
which was always going to be a long episode, and then we'll do a quick
review of the season.
Talk. I can't remember what questions we asked ourselves last season, but I'll figure them out.
If only it was recorded in some kind of way that we could access easily, perhaps on our phones.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, cool, nice, wonderful,
great. So, thanks so much for listening. As expected, a slightly long episode, but we're talking about Becoming, so I'm sure you enjoy it and expect it.
It's not very becoming of us, though, is it? To put out such a long episode.
So we're not going to delete this one either, is generally the plan. And we are looking forward to next week. We'll have you join us then. If you enjoyed this episode, if anybody talks about it, tweet them at Buffy Boys, not at Brian, because he wouldn't like that. Okay, so thank you for listening to Buffy Boys. Tell your friends, tell your exposition area museum curators, and we will see you next week for Becoming Part 2 on
what? On iTunes? On Buffy Boys.
Buffy Boys, this show we're on. We're the Buffy Boys.
Yeah, that's true. It's because we're so buff.
Yeah. Like, that's so fucking stupid. Okay, so
actually, no, very quickly, we were talking about this. We're going to probably, when we get to season 4 and Angel is coming out at the same time as the episodes, we're probably going to be watching Angel ourselves, and just to have a good amount of like background knowledge of what's happening in Angel at the same time, maybe we can pick up some similar themes and stuff. But what we're going to call it, that's where we just do a quick review of what happened in Angel this week. We decided it's going to be every week, because Cordelia moves over there, it's going to be the Cordelia Chase.
Yeah, it's very good.
So, look forward to that. Okay. Talk to you next week.
No,
I'm going to talk to you next week.
Okay. See you next time on Buffy Boys.
Buffy Boys. Yeah, cool. Great.
See ya.
Bye.